Okay, I discussed about various ways of risk models. I've tried to use a design thinking approach to make it as simple as possible. Now, there are five major components in a risk model. The probability. What is the probability of that risk to happen? Second is impact. If the risk happens, what will be the impact on the objective or on the project? Third is mitigation factor. How much effort will it take for us to mitigate that risk? Fourth, knowledge. How much knowledge the risk owner has to actually mitigate that risk. Correct? A person with lesser knowledge will be able to mitigate that risk with a lesser degree. An expert who has expert knowledge on that risk factor might be able to reduce the impact or mitigate that risk close to 100%. As I said previously, it will never be 100%, but an expert will be able to mitigate that risk to a very large extent. Last is weightage. What is the weightage of that risk on our project or on our objective, right? Now, we need to calculate the risk for a particular project in terms of numbers. Now, difficult part is, regardless which model you are implementing, you can implement all the model in one project, but regardless which model you're implementing, that depends upon what kind of project you're running, how complex it is, what's the value of the project in terms of dollar, how big is the project, how widespread is the project, multi-stakeholder, multi-client, multi-geography, right? So we need to use our judgment, our knowledge to pick the right model. I will be talking about 2-3 different models which are very specific to IT industry. Okay, let me take you to Excel. One of the risk model which is very famous in IT industry is this, where we write down all the risk of a particular project. We assign a value, we assign the weightage. The weightage should always add up to 100, correct? And the value is on the scale of 1 to 5. And multiplying the value with the weightage will give you the net risk exposure. And when you add all that, you actually get the risk of the particular project. Now, we need to understand this automatically 3.40, which is red. If it was 1, it would have become green. Let me do Control Z. Now, how do we distribute this risk, whether it is like this number, whether it is low risk, medium risk, or high risk? Now, the approach that I take, you can have a different approach altogether. I use a distribution of 30, 40, and 30. If it is a distribution of lower 30, it's a low risk. If it is in the middle 40, lower 30 is low risk, upper 30 is high risk. Whatever is in between is the moderate risk. 30 plus 30 is 60, 100 minus 60 is 40. Now, as it is a scale of 1 to 5, so equals 5 into 30% is 1.5. That's why I see 0 to 1.5 is low risk. And then again, for the upper 30, it will be 1.5. So 3.5 to 5 is high risk. Whatever is in between, which is 1.5 to 3.5, is a moderate risk. Okay. So that's why you see here it shows 3.40 and it is showing as high risk. Maybe you can take it as upper 40. So it will be a different number, equals 5 into 40%. So it will be 2. So 3 to 5 will be high. 3 to 5 will show as high risk. So here it will be 1.5 to 3 as moderate risk. Now you can have your 40, 40, 80. Okay, sorry, it's 30. Okay, so you can have your own judgment, your own measure. As we discussed in one of the slides, most of the companies have their own risk measurements, right? There's a threshold. Some companies say the threshold is 4, some companies say the threshold is 3, sometimes it's 3.5, sometimes it differs from company to company and project to project as well. So use your judgment, make it, I usually take 3.5 to 5 or 4 to 5 as very high risk and 2 to 4 as moderate risk. So use your own judgment, and easier way to create a risk register is write down all the items, assign a value on the scale of 1 to 5, 5 being highest, 1 being lowest, assign a weightage, multiply both this into this, you get this number. You add all that, you get the overall score of the project. On the basis of this, you can have a go or no go. Or if it's a no go, you need to put a mitigation plan and then revisit the project. Model 2 is okay. Instead of jumping to another model, this is a risk register. I write down all the name, I give a description of the risk, categorize it, write down the cause, what will cause this disaster. Okay, what is the mitigation plan? You're right. My mitigation plan is to shift part of the project to other location. Try that. Proposed response. Actually, proposed response is nothing but the mitigation plan itself. Oh, sorry. Mitigation plan is different. Proposed response is if this risk happens, then what I'm going to do. Okay. Basically, this proposed response should come after owner. Who is the owner of that risk? And if this happens, the owner should write what will be his proposed response. What is going to do? Owner's knowledge. As I said, most of the people don't take this component. And then we come directly to what is the probability. On a scale of 1 to 5, as I said, 1 is always lowest, 5 is always highest. Same goes in impact. 1 is always lowest, 3 is always highest. Okay, sorry, 5 is the highest, 3 is in between. So we think that for natural disaster, the probability of that happening is very low, is 1. But if that happens, it'll be 5. The impact will be 5. So the risk value of this particular item is 20, right? The overall risk value is 3.1. 3.1, don't go by green, this is not 3.1. It's a moderate risk project. If it was above 3.5 to 5, I would have taken it as higher risk project. So right now it is 3.1. I have not done the conditional formatting. You can do it your way. So these are the two risk models which are very prevalent. One is this way of making is when you don't have much of time. But the ideal way is you make it like this. You write all the risk. Let me copy paste it for you. Let's see. You copy this. Um, you copy it and you paste it over here. Okay, and you do it. And you do it like this. Okay, this was not the okay. The formula is equals sum of all the parameters of all the risk factors raised to the power 1 by 4. So it's 2. The risk of this overall project is 2. Why I'm getting 2 is I've put in a different kind of different parameters, and it's generating a random number because I don't want to put the numbers on my own as we are doing a dummy project. In a real case, you will assign, let's say it's a mul- multi-project, multi-practice project, or let's say the complexity. Okay, let's take this particular row as an example. Let me mark it yellow. Complexity. Complexity of this project. Let's say we have got an airline project, and complexity of designing this particular project will be, probability will be very high. Correct. Impact is, if this goes wrong, impact will be high. Mitigation factor. How much effort I'm going to put to mitigate this? Now, to mitigate this risk, I need to have high quality of people. Maybe if they are not available in the organization, I might have to hire them. And as they are expert on certain things, they might not be readily available. The cost will be high. The joining time will be high. Correct. The training will be difficult. So the overall mitigation factor, the effort it's going to take will be high. So I mark it 5. And knowledge factor. How much knowledge as a risk owner do I have on this complexity of the project that I am capable enough to assign these numbers correctly? I think I have fairly good knowledge, so I will assign it 4. I am not saying that I am expert, I am marking it 1. If I'm expert, it means these numbers are right. Okay. But I think I have moderate understanding, so I mark it 3. So my overall risk probability and the weightage is only 5. These are just a dummy number. Let me change the weightage. So right now we have 45. Let's make it 50. Okay. Now what's the total? 90. Let's make it 15 this. Now you see, we have total weightage of 100. The complexity, there are many risks, but the risk because of this particular parameter is 50%. The weightage is very high, and because of this, the skills and expertise is 15%. Rest everything is 5, right? So the risk component which has the highest is this and this, and the other one is this. So new client, yeah. So this factor, if I just highlight, it's a new client, and we don't have very good long-term relationship. So we need to make sure that we are delivering a good values. So that's why we see that total risk probability is coming as 15. So these 3 areas that I definitely should bring in front of my leadership team, right? These are the areas that we should definitely make sure we are doing good. Now the overall risk of the project is coming 3. It's still a go ahead, right? So there are other risk models as we discussed in during the PPT. Let me go to the full screen mode. So we discussed this model which is on the basis of probability and impact. The second risk model that we discussed was on the basis of probability and weightage. And the last risk model that we discussed was on the basis of probability, impact, mitigation factor, knowledge, and weightage. I use this. I use this, but sometimes I have to omit knowledge part depending on the situation. The time I omit the knowledge part, I actually directly jump onto which part? Which is the fifth, which is the fifth model. Fifth model is based on probability, impact, mitigation, and weightage. You see, the yellow line is probability, impact, and mitigation factor. All 3 club in, and then we have weightage. Okay. Now, as we discussed, the formula of that particular risk is raised to the power 1 by 4. I'm not going to discuss that in detail, that how or what goes behind, like how this formula was derived. But when you have 5 parameters, this is how it works. Another thing that you have to keep in mind, whenever you have weightage in your risk model, you need to do sum. You have to sum up all the risk factors or risk values. But if you do not have weightage in your risk model, you have to average out all the risk values. Whether you are raising it By what power? That depends upon number of variables you are taking into picture. Let me repeat. Whenever you have weightage in your risk model, you have to sum. Whenever you do not have weightage in your model, you need to do average of all the risk values. Whether you are raising it by power of 1 to like 1 by 2, 1 by 3, 1 by 4, 1 by 5 and stuff, that depends upon number of variables you have in your risk model. There is another training that I have where I am discussing only on risk models. You might want to join that. It's a continuation of this where I have discussed all the 6 different risk models and when to use which one and how did we arrive on a particular how did we arrive the particular risk equation. One thing yet that you have to understand that you don't go ahead and do basic multiplication to the stuff. You might your risk calculation might look fairly good, but when you will scale it up, it will fail completely. One of the most important thing is you have to make sure that your risk scale is on 1 to 5. In all the situation, your risk model should fall in the scale of 1 to 5. If you're like whatever equation you're using, this thing you have to keep in mind. Okay, so let's take a quick look what we discussed. Risk is something that is uncertain and in the future, and we need to make sure that we have an action plan around it to reduce its, if not likelihood, at least to reduce its impact. Now, impact can be positive or can be negative. To reduce the impact, we have a mitigation plan in place, correct? And anything, sometimes risk become issue. High risk was 2 people will drop their paper in the future. Now they have already dropped. When we get into the future after 2 months, these guys drop the paper. Now it becomes an issue, right? For risk, we create a register. For issue, we create a log. They're different risk governance model. Informal model where you use the good policy based when is a single policy, custom based when it depends upon project to project. Hybrid model is when you have a single policy and you have a custom model as well. The hybrid model. Most of the IT industries are using the hybrid model. Now, how do we respond to the risk? Avoid it, mitigate it, transfer it, like take the insurance, accept it. Like I accept it. I'm going to drive a bike. Risk mitigation we discussed. Qualitative, quantitative way, what are the risk register? And I'm not going to definition again. Components of risk register, I'm sure you know it by now. Leadership risk, it's a very important part. Steps to create a risk register, identify the risk, write the description, what's the probability, how much damage it will do, how do we create our risk response strategy, like what is the mitigation plan, have we documented it, how are we communicating with the stakeholders, because sometimes stakeholder will tell you what to do and what not to do. Risk mitigation process, make sure that you do the benefit assessment. You cannot imply a control to reduce the impact and then you find the control measure is costing you much more than what the impact would have been, right? So assess the benefit, the cost, and then check out the residual risk. And we discussed the various risk models. All right, guys, this is Devansh. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Bye bye.